a house outright for less than $200,000. No mortgage, no decades of repayments eating into your pension. For a retiree watching superannuation stretch thinner every year, that number can feel like the entire solution arriving all at once. And in 8 specific Australian towns, that number is genuinely real, verifiable, sitting on real listings right now. Here's what almost never makes it into the glossy regional tourism brochure sitting next to that listing. A cheap purchase price isn't the end of the financial story. Sometimes it's just the opening chapter of a much more expensive one. And for retirees specifically, the kind of expensive superannuation, a fixed, largely non-renewable pool of money, simply cannot always absorb. Today we're going through 8 towns marketed heavily at retirees for their rock-bottom real estate and looking honestly at what that price tag is actually compensating for. Before the countdown, it's worth understanding the basic mechanism at play here. Regional migration marketing exists to sell a lifestyle, sunshine, space, community, and it's genuinely not lying when it shows you those things. What it tends to leave out is the maintenance reality of older housing stock, the true distance to specialist medical care as your body ages, and how illiquid property becomes once you actually need to sell it quickly in a thin regional market. None of that means these towns are worthless. It means the true cost of living somewhere only becomes visible several years after you've already moved in. And by then, the money that would have let you leave has often already gone somewhere else. Let's start underground in the desert. Coober Pedy offers some of the cheapest property in the entire country and an entire underground housing culture built specifically to escape summer surface temperatures that regularly exceed 45 degrees. Living in a dugout carved directly into sandstone genuinely solves the heat problem elegantly. Stable year-round temperatures without punishing air conditioning bills. What it doesn't solve is what happens when that sandstone needs attention. Rock face maintenance against moisture intrusion and structural movement is specialized work, not a job for a general suburban handyman. And it's work that has to happen in one of the most isolated towns on this list. Add fragile, isolated utility infrastructure and a genuinely serious gap in local aged care and specialist medical services, with the nearest major hospital many hours away by road. And the real question becomes less about the heat and considerably more about what happens during a genuine medical emergency, when minutes matter and the nearest cardiologist is a flight rather than a drive away. From underground desert isolation, we travel to Tasmania's west coast, into a landscape shaped by over a century of relentless rain. Queenstown markets its heritage mining charm alongside genuinely striking rust-orange moonscape hills and home prices sitting well below the national median. What the postcard doesn't show you is the rainfall total behind it. This region receives well over 2,000 millimeters of rain annually, among the wettest inhabited parts of the country, translating into month after month of overcast, damp conditions that take a genuine, documented psychological toll for people prone to seasonal mood changes. Persistent dampness is also a genuine structural enemy. Chronic mold issues in older, poorly ventilated housing stock are a well-known regional challenge here, damaging furniture, clothing, and, for anyone with respiratory sensitivity, genuine ongoing health. And because so few buyers are actively seeking this exact combination of isolation and climate, homes here can sit on the market for years, even when priced attractively, which matters enormously if your retirement plan ever requires converting that house back into cash on short notice. From damp southern mountains, we head north into tropical heat to a grand gold rush town built during a very different economic era. Charters Towers offers sprawling, heritage-listed Queenslander homes, the classic high-set timber design built specifically to catch cooling breezes at a fraction of coastal city prices. That heritage listing, though, cuts both ways. Local and state heritage conservation rules genuinely can restrict certain modern energy efficiency upgrades on listed properties, meaning some owners face real limits on retrofitting better insulation or more efficient cooling systems precisely in a climate that punishes inefficient housing hardest. Tropical heat and humidity that can send electricity bills soaring on a fixed pension income. Queensland's climate is also well documented, genuinely difficult for timber steel construction. Aggressive termite pressure is a serious, ongoing maintenance cost across the state, and older high-set homes require vigilant, recurring pest inspection and treatment specifically to protect the structural timber holding the entire house up. Layer in a real documented shortage of the specialist medical services across much of regional Queensland, and the gap between purchase price and total cost of ownership starts looking considerably wider than the listing alone suggests. From tropical heat back across to Tasmania's coast, to a former mining town where the local economy has largely moved on without it. Zeehan sells dirt-cheap colonial cottages and genuine quiet solitude. But that solitude is downstream of a real, ongoing population decline as the town's original mining economy has contracted over decades. Fewer residents means fewer sustainable local businesses, and Zeehan has genuinely seen local commercial services thin out over time, pushing routine trips for groceries, banking or pharmacy needs into longer drives than most retirees moving from a city would ever anticipate. Volunteer emergency services, which many small Tasmanian towns rely on rather than full-time paid crews, also face real strain as local population and volunteer numbers shrink together. And a housing market this thin cuts in a particularly painful direction for retirees. Specifically, if you ever need to sell quickly, whether for medical reasons or to move closer to family, a market with genuinely few active buyers can leave a property sitting unsold for a very long time, precisely when you need that equity released fastest. From a fading mining town, we head to outback New South Wales, to a far larger, more storied city facing a different version of the same fundamental problem. Broken Hill offers genuinely spacious Federation-era homes at deeply discounted inland prices, backed by real civic infrastructure and a celebrated arts community. The climate here swings to real extremes, freezing winter nights giving way to severe summer heat, and the region is genuinely prone to significant dust storms, fine red dust that scours exterior paintwork, degrades solar panel efficiency over time, and works its way into air conditioning and filtration systems in a way that adds real recurring maintenance costs most new arrivals don't budget for. The more serious issue, though, mirrors Coober Pedy's genuine distance from major metropolitan medical centres, meaning specialist care, particularly for the kind of ongoing cardiology, oncology or geriatric specialist, needs that become more likely with age, frequently requires either a lengthy road trip or an emergency flight. And the cost of that distance, in both money and risk, rarely shows up anywhere on the original property listing. From outback dust, we head to a Queensland regional centre marketed as a leafy, affordable alternative just inland from the Sunshine Coast. Gympie sits directly on the Mary River, and this is not a minor, occasional flood risk we're describing. It's one of the most extensively documented flood histories of any regional centre in the state, with major flooding recorded as far back as 1893 and repeated significant events through the 20th century and into recent years, including 2 separate major flood events in a single year as recently as 2022, with river levels reaching close to 23 metres, the second highest peak ever recorded in the town. That history has real direct consequences for retirees specifically. Properties in the most flood-exposed pockets can face insurance premiums that consume a genuinely painful share of a fixed pension income, and in the most severe cases, insurers have declined coverage entirely for certain high-risk zones following major catastrophe events. Buying cheap acreage near this river system without independently verifying flood mapping and getting an actual insurance quote before signing anything isn't caution. Given this specific history, it's simply due diligence. From a flood-prone river valley, we head south into Victoria's Latrobe Valley, a region that's lived through one of the most significant regional economic transitions in the country. Mo offers genuinely some of the cheapest suburban brick housing in the entire state, and it's drawn real interest from Melbourne retirees priced out of the metropolitan market. That affordability is directly tied to the valley's broader economic story. The region's coal-fired power industry, once the area's dominant employer, has contracted significantly over recent decades, including the closure of the major Hazelwood power station in 2017. And that kind of structural economic transition tends to show up in local housing markets as genuinely stagnant capital growth. Properties that simply don't appreciate the way markets in growing regions do, which matters enormously for anyone counting on their homes of a broader overall white Mayan. Winters here are also genuinely cold and damp by Victorian standards, pushing heating costs up through a season that runs longer than most new arrivals expect. Which brings us to the final entry, and in some ways the cruelest trap on this entire list, because this one doesn't come dressed as an obvious warning sign at all. St Helens on Tasmania's stunning east coast is a genuine fishing town postcard come to life, and that beauty is exactly the problem. Rapid tourism-driven gentrification has pushed local council rates upward in a way that increasingly outpaces fixed pension incomes. While the underlying services a retiree actually needs, specifically consistent year-round medical coverage, can thin out dramatically once the tourist season ends and seasonal demand disappears. There's a genuinely difficult secondary effect worth understanding too. As holiday home investment pushes local property and rental prices up, the tradespeople, nurses, and support staff a community actually depends on can themselves get priced out of living locally, thinning out exactly the workforce a retiree eventually needs most at precisely the moment demand for that support tends to increase with age. So here's the pattern sitting underneath every single one of these 8 towns. In each case, without exception, an attractively low purchase price was quietly offsetting a real, specific, verifiable cost sitting somewhere else entirely. Structural maintenance, medical distance, insurance risk, or a market too thin to reliably sell into again. None of that means any of these towns are actually uninhabitable, or that the people living there happily are making some kind of mistake. It means the sticker price on a regional listing was never the complete financial picture, and treating it as one is exactly how a retirement nest egg built over 40 working years gets slowly, quietly drained by expenses nobody budgeted for at the point of purchase. The real lesson here isn't to avoid regional Australia. It's to weight your decision toward liquidity, genuine medical access, and structural integrity, at least as heavily as you weight the number on the price tag itself, and to get real, current insurance quotes and flood or structural reports before you sign anything, not after. Do you live in or near one of these 8 towns? Tell me in the comments whether this matches your own experience, or whether we got something wrong, because nobody knows the real, on-the-ground reality of a place better than the people actually living there.